Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Inventory Cog in-depth tutorial. This is going to be the second to last video, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at looting, dropping, and wiring up skills. So we're going to start off with skills first. Let's pop into the project real quick and have a look. I've dropped in some basic objects getting the scene ready for the demo. And now let's start wiring everything up. The first thing to look at here is these skill slots. This is one of the newer items from Inventory Cog, and it allows you to do basically anything you want with them. These can be skills like classic Nintendo games where you need to equip an item to jump, or it could be sort of a fantasy game where you have a cooldown button that allows you to cast spells or things like that. In this case, we're going to go with the classic approach where we're wiring a skill to a button. And so for that, because it can change in such a wide variety of ways, hooking that up is left to you. So we're going to do that in this video. We're going to do a quick hookup to make the feather have you jump. And to complicate matters more, of course, you can assign that to either of the skill slots or any of the skill slots if you had more than two. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put on key listeners, trigger by keys to each of these skill slots that we've previously put on. And we're going to wire them up for the correct buttons. So the first one will be Q, and the second slot will be E. Oops. All right, and then we're going to also need to create a new script. So let's get into the Inventory and Stats RPG, and we'll open up scripts, and we'll create a new script, Skill Manager. And we'll need a new public void use skill. And what we're going to do is we'll pass in the skill slot that we're using. Right, we're going to need to use the using talk. Let's see, let's go into this real quick and see what we've got here. Okay, so we're not publicly showing this yet, so let's go ahead and add that. We'll create a new property for this. And so what we'll do is whenever this is invoked by the inventory cog, will give us an update when our skill changes, which then calls this update UI. And what we'll do right there is we'll set the attached skill item. Let me make that attached instead of attach. Equal to skill. Okay, now we can read in from that. So what we want to do is, because the key listener or key trigger doesn't know whether or not there's something attached, we'll check to it first. So if it's no, we'll just return. And then this can do multiple things for us. So let's see, we're also going to I want a reference to the animator. Because we're going to be, for the feather, we're going to set a trigger on the animator. So now we're going to do switch skill slot dot attach skill item and then name. And let's pop back over to our project so that I can just double check that the name that we have on this. So feather of lightness. Okay. Do player animator dot set trigger jump. And if we go back to our project and take a look at the player, and bring up the animator, we can see it's got a parameter for a jump trigger, and in the layers, we've got this jump action that changes based on our forward speed. So we only need this manager here once, so let's put it at the top of skills, and we'll put in skill manager, and we'll drag in the player for the player animator. And so for both of these guys, we'll add on key down, skill manager, use skill, and then we'll just drag in the right skill slot for each. Okay, so that should be all we need to be able to jump. I think I removed all of the starting objects here, so let me go ahead and put in the feather again. Okay, and now let's hit play and see how that works out for us. So if we go to skills, we'll assign this to Q. All right, and let's hit Q. There we go. Look at us jump. Fantastic. We'll do some additional coding for the wand. I'll probably do that outside of a tutorial, and you can just go ahead and grab the script from the download. And here's what everything is going to look like once we're done. So this is already wired up because these are so quick and simple. But we'll step through each of these. So we've got a loot UI auto equip, and this will give us our default loot UI, and it will automatically equip the item when we loot it. We've got an auto pickup where there is no item, it's just currency. You can do it with an item as well. This is just showing off that it can be done with a null item. Loot UI, so this is just a normal item with a normal UI. And then you can also override the UI for any single item that you want if there's something special that you need for particular items like a quest item or anything like that. You can go ahead and use this. So that's what we're going to have at the end. We're also going to look at the dropping. So if I open up the inventory and I were to drop this item right here, it looks okay from this perspective, but if we go into the scene, we can see that it's actually floating up in the air. And the reason for that is inventory cog has a dropping location for us that tells us where to drop, and we're setting it at 1.5 off of the Y and 2 forward. And this is to give us space to drop things. This is by default. You can change it to whatever you want. But we also want to go ahead and add in a rigid body on this so that it will fall down. And I will do that with you, and we can see how everything works. So let's fix the backpack here. We'll go into the loot object. And the best way to do this when you're going to go ahead and have the rigid body is to sort of nest it. So we'll create an empty object. Let's see. I guess we'll duplicate it into itself. Might be the easiest way. So for this on the child, we'll remove the box collider and the loot item script. So just remove these, and then we'll add a rigid body. And we'll add a mesh collider. And we'll make that convex. Okay. And then up here, we'll remove the mesh renderer and mesh filter. And that should take care of it for us. So let's have a look at this real quick. We'll go ahead and just loot the backpack. See, we're missing something here. Let's take a look at this item. So we can see that it is sort of moving now, right? It's dropped over, and this may just be that now the mesh color, or the trigger is no longer reaching us. So let's see. Yeah, maybe if I just make this a little taller. Yep, that's it. So it was just, we were missing it. Obviously, you know, the character controller was having an issue there running through the mesh a little bit, but yeah, that looks good. So now if we pick it up and then just instantly drop it, there we go. I don't know if you saw that in the background, but it dropped down. So it started off at the 1.2 or whatever height, or 1.5 and 2 forward, and then it sort of fell down with the mesh glider. So that's all we need for that. Now let's look at how we set up each of these loot items. So these guys, these prompts that you see there, just canvases that I put for each of them. And then I hide them based on events. So let's now look at these loot items. We'll look at the sword first. And what we've got here is the regular loot item script. And it loots our magic sword. It gives us a count of 1. And I've checked the auto equip. This is what allows us to automatically equip it. The item has to be set to allow auto equip as well. And then in the on loot event, I just passed in the canvas and set it to inactive. Now let's have a look at one of these coins here. This is again a regular loot item, and we've got 0. We've got no item at all. We've got a count of 1, but it doesn't matter because there's no item there. We are setting the currency, however, and we've got it set to auto pickup. So as we walked over it, you may have noticed that we have no prompt. We never display a prompt if it's auto pickup. So we can see right there. None of those displayed. And again, the same thing. Each one of those coins on loot is setting this guy to not display. The backpack is just a regular loot UI, so there's no override, there's no auto equip, there's no auto pickup. It just adds the backpack in. And finally, we have the wand. And this guy, what we did was I took the prefab that was made for us by the inventory DB editor, dragged it into the scene and modified it. So originally, we could see that it had, oh, that's the preview, that it had the loot item component on it. And what I did there was I replaced the loot item component with the loot item with UI. And that just gives us a couple of extra settings here. So it still has the on loot, on pickup requested. This allows you to also pick up manually instead of by the original trigger, which is required for it to work this way. But it can just reference itself and do an add to inventory. And it allows you to supply a pickup UI, which we just made this simple little component. I put the trigger by key on it to trigger the pickup itself. And those are the only differences. So we've got the item, we've got the count. no auto equip. We do pick it up upon request, which the pickup mode is manual in this event, so that the prompt can take care of it. And we're spawning it inside of the player UI tag. So I think the only thing left to cover in this video is going to be how we got that default prompt set up. So if we look at the player and go into the UI section, there is a pick up and drop right at the top here, and you can supply a prompt and the detection mode, so you can do either by trigger, which is what we're doing, or by a raycast from the main camera if you're doing sort of a first person or a third person over the shoulder sort of free camera movement like that, and you want the vision to dictate. You can also, when you do that, if you do the raycast, you can set an offset location and a max distance, so it's not like you can set the raycast out forever. You can contain it, and then in this case we're just activating the object since it already exists. We could spawn it just like we could with the other prompt, and then all this is it's another prompt UI. We give it a text mesh pro and then a format of F with pickup, and then 0 in curly brackets, and 0 is replaced with the item name. So that's going to be the end for part 5 here. The final part is going to show us how to deal with crafting and merchants. So I hope this video has been of help to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.